As we transition from understanding wildfire behavior in the last section, we now move into one of the most actionable and practical components of wildfire prevention: defensible space and the home ignition zone. This is where knowledge becomes physical action on the property itself. While fuel, weather, and topography explain how fires behave, defensible space explains how homes survive. This section is critical for real estate professionals because it directly impacts property condition, insurability, marketability, and ultimately transaction success. Understanding defensible space and the home ignition zone. Defensible space, also referred to as survivable space, is the strategic modification of vegetation, landscaping, and building materials around a structure to reduce the likelihood of ignition during a wildfire. The concept is simple but powerful. Your home is more likely to survive a wildfire if the surrounding fuels are managed in a way that reduces fire intensity and prevents direct flame contact or ember ignition. This includes not just the primary residence, but also detached garages, sheds, barns, and other structures on the property. The home ignition zone focuses on the area immediately surrounding the structure, where the majority of wildfire damage actually occurs. Contrary to what many believe, most homes do not ignite from a wall of flames. They ignite from embers. These embers can travel long distances and land on roofs, in vents, or in debris near the home. This is where defensible space becomes essential. The 3 zones of defensible space. Defensible space is divided into 3 primary zones, each with specific requirements and strategies. These zones work together to slow fire spread, reduce intensity, and protect the structure. Zone 1. Immediate zone, 0-5 feet, the red zone. This is the most critical area and begins directly at the structure. This zone should be treated as a non-combustible buffer. The goal is to eliminate anything that could ignite from embers. This includes repairing roof issues, maintaining vents and eaves, and installing mesh screening to prevent ember intrusion. Debris must be cleared from vents, roofs, and around the foundation. Any flammable materials such as wood piles, patio furniture, or decorative items should be moved away from the structure. Vegetation in this zone should be minimal. Decorative gravel, concrete, or fire-resistant materials are preferred. Plants, if used, should be low-growing and fire-resistant. Branches should be trimmed away from roofs and chimneys to prevent direct flame contact. For example, a home in Payson with pine needles accumulated in roof valleys and wood stacked against the exterior creates a perfect ignition point during an ember storm. This is a preventable risk that directly impacts property survivability. Zone 2. Intermediate zone, 5-30 feet, the orange zone. This zone focuses on landscaping and fuel spacing. The goal is to reduce fire intensity and prevent flames from reaching the structure. Trees should be spaced properly, typically with at least 18 feet between crowns, and mature trees should not be closer than 10 feet to the home. Grass should be maintained at a low height, typically around 4 inches. Vegetation should be thinned and maintained to prevent continuous fuel paths. Special attention should be given to propane tanks, which should be cleared of surrounding vegetation and positioned safely away from structures. For example, in a Prescott subdivision, homes with dense shrubs and tightly spaced trees create a continuous fuel source that allows fire to move directly toward structures. Proper spacing and maintenance break this pathway and significantly reduce risk. Zone 3, Extended Zone, 30-100 plus feet, the green zone. This zone focuses on managing the broader landscape to slow wildfire spread before it reaches the home. The objective is fuel reduction and overall land management. Dead plants, fallen branches, and debris should be removed. Vegetation should be thinned, especially near outbuildings and fences. Tree spacing should increase with distance, and ladder fuels, vegetation that allows fire to climb from the ground into tree canopies, should be removed. This zone may extend beyond 100 feet depending on slope and terrain, particularly in mountainous areas. The steeper the slope, the greater the distance required for effective protection. For example, a property in Flagstaff located on a slope with dense forest behind it requires a much larger defensible space area than a flat property in the Phoenix metro area. Embers, the hidden threat. One of the most important concepts for both agents and clients to understand is that embers are the primary cause of home ignition during wildfires. Embers can travel miles ahead of a fire and ignite homes through small vulnerabilities such as vents, roof gaps, or accumulated debris. This is why the immediate zone is so critical. Simple actions such as installing mesh screens, clearing gutters, and removing flammable materials can make the difference between a home surviving or being destroyed. The role of building materials and design. Defensible space is not just about landscaping, it also includes the structure itself. Fire-resistant building materials such as non-combustible roofing, siding, and decking significantly reduce vulnerability. For example, homes with tile roofs, stucco exteriors, and metal screening are far more resistant to ember intrusion than homes with wood-shake roofs or exposed vents. This becomes especially important when advising buyers comparing two properties. Construction materials can directly impact long-term risk and insurance costs. Real estate application, defensible space, as a market factor. Defensible space is not just a safety measure, it is a marketability factor. A well-maintained property with clear defensible space signals to buyers that the home has been properly cared for and that wildfire risk has been mitigated. This can lead to stronger offers, smoother inspections, and fewer issues during underwriting. On the other hand, a property with overgrown vegetation, poor maintenance, and visible fire hazards may raise red flags for buyers, inspectors, and insurance companies. This can delay or even prevent closing. For example, if a buyer's insurance provider requires mitigation measures before issuing a policy, the transaction may be delayed until those conditions are met. This ties directly into AAC R4-28-1101, Reasonable Care, and your duty to recognize and communicate observable risks. While agents are not inspectors, visible hazards such as stacked firewood against a home or dense vegetation near structures should prompt further discussion and professional recommendations. HOA and community considerations. In Arizona, defensible space requirements are not universally mandated by state law. However, some HOAs and local jurisdictions may have guidelines or requirements aligned with Firewise principles. This creates an important layer of due diligence. When working within an HOA, you should review community rules to determine whether defensible space standards apply. Non-compliance could lead to fines or required modifications, which may affect a buyer's decision. Additionally, communities that collectively implement defensible space practices are significantly more resilient. Wildfire protection is not just an individual effort, it is a community strategy. Transition to next section, defensible space into disclosure and liability. Now that we understand how defensible space protects homes, the next step is connecting these physical conditions to legal obligations. In the following section, we will tie defensible space directly into disclosure requirements, SPDS considerations, and liability exposure for agents and sellers. This is where physical risk becomes legal responsibility. Online discussion. Why is the immediate zone, 0.5 feet, considered the most critical area in defensible space? Answer: because it is the closest area to the structure where embers are most likely to ignite materials, making it the first line of defense against home ignition. How do embers contribute to home destruction during wildfires? Answer: embers can travel long distances and ignite homes by landing in vulnerable areas such as roofs, vents, and debris, often before the main fire arrives. How can defensible space impact a real estate transaction? Answer: it can affect insurability, buyer perception, inspection results, and overall risk, potentially influencing whether a transaction closes successfully.